What's up, guys? It is Wednesday, January 12th, 2022, A.D. Anno Domini. It's 9:01 a.m. U.S. Pacific Standard Time. At 9:10, we are scheduled to have the great Dylan Burns on my show. So fast forward to 10 minutes in, or 9 or 10 minutes in, and hopefully we'll be connecting. But it is the Hake Report, and I'm going to be talking with a guest today, a liberal guest. He has been on the Fallen State, Dylan Burns. And I'm going to talk with you, the callers. Some of you already on hold, some of you calling in. If you'd like to talk with Dylan Burns, perhaps you would be, you would like to ask him a question or give him any feedback, you can do so. Later this hour, 888-775-3773. We're going to talk about a man who was mentioned on the Jesse Lee Peterson show by a caller, and I've wondered about him every so often. Sheriff David Clarke, a solid, pretty solid, seemingly solid guy. I've brought him on the Jesse Lee Peterson show when I was producer. Interesting statements that he has made in favor of the American patriots. By the way, he was a lifelong, maybe to this day, a Democrat, but he's pro-Trump, and he's pro-America, I think. That's cool. And this silly woman, well, she's dead now. Angela, what's her name? Maya Angelou. She got on a quarter. I told you about it in Hake News. You may have seen a little bit about it on the Jesse Lee Peterson show, heard about it just today. I'm on Jesse Lee Peterson's network. Oh my gosh. And some other stuff. Very interesting. But anyway, guys, let's get right on with the show!
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La, la, la. Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La, la, la.
Hey, guys!
Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La, la, la. Oh, it's the Hake Report. The Hake Report. La, la, la.
So, how are you guys doing? I am fine. If you're not already aware, just a heads up, I am wearing, man, my screen looks pretty busy today. I have "To God Be the Glory" sticker, "Get a Job" sticker, the Continental Soldier, and a "Rebuilding the Country by Rebuilding the Man" Jesse Lee Peterson 2024 t-shirt. And it's all like bright white on dark navy blue t-shirt. This exact design is not available for sale through the the Jesse Lee Peterson Teespring store, but rebuildingtheman.com/stores, and it will take you to various different t-shirts related to JLP, to Bond, to the Fallen State, which I do think has a version of this Jesse Lee Peterson 2024 Indie JLP 2024 t-shirt, available in color and black. It's pretty stylish. So sort of similar if you want something similar to what I'm wearing. Just FYI, side note. Hake has t-shirts for sale too. TheHakeReport.com, and look for the Teespring link, right? Very cool. Your girlfriend with a super chat already over there on Odyssey. Hippy Dippy Loosey Goosey. Yeah, I know. Where's your flag? It's underneath this part. I figure since I'm going to have a guest on in the next few minutes, he may want to like repost it, and maybe he doesn't want to show the, a lot of Twitch streamers cover interviews and things. And Twitch, I've heard, I don't know if it's true, Twitch calls this a hate symbol. Isn't that so wrong? They call it a hate symbol. Not this, the soldier, but this, what's underneath is the rebel flag. It's a symbol of love for the South, for everybody. Come on. Unity. Where's the unity? A couple of quick announcements before I do get to the guests, guys. Let me tell you. Tonight, I do have I am a guest on a Twitch stream. Today's Wednesday the 12th, right? 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 Eastern, for like maybe max 3 hours. I'm on MrFanatiq show on Twitch. MrFanatiq. MrFanatiq. Fanatic is the guy who was on my show a few weeks ago when I was playing Suffering and the Hideous Thieves. And he's a Christian. He's on Twitch. He's a pianist, meaning he plays piano very well. Musician. Liberal kind of a guy, but or at least liberal compared to me. And we'll talk about January 6th thing. Yeah, I have to cover the flag just for the sake of Twitch, just in case Twitch, whatever. I don't know. And then this Sunday, I'm going to appear at Modern Day Debate. And I do believe I've heard that Dylan Burns, my guest coming up, he's also going to be at Modern Day Debate, DebateCon, Debate Convention, Dallas 2022. And I will post in my blog post for today's show, the Eventbrite announcement. The Eventbrite announcement, on which you can buy tickets if you want to attend in person. You can become a member of the Modern Day Debate YouTube channel. They have hosted me like 3 times. Jesse Lee, at least once. I'm going to be on Sunday, January 16th at the Modern Day Debate Convention, Dallas 2022, 11:35 a.m. Central Time Sunday, which is before church with Jesse Lee Peterson, but it may encroach a little bit, with T-Jump, Dylan Burns, Xanderthal, and James Hake about how many genders are there, and is the left progressing or regressing? And then again, another debate, 2:30 with Dylan Burns again, Amy Newman, Destiny, and James Hake, panel on transgender rights and critical race theory, CRT. Cool, huh? So maybe I'll see you guys in Dallas. Don't say that, Justin Barnett. Don't say it like that. Justin Barnett says Hake is, well, I'm going to say it nicely, bowing to the man, covering up the Twitch thing. I'm just being considerate because other people don't want their channels to get taken down. That's all. Just being considerate, man. Anyway, guys, I have a guest with me. Is he ready? The great Dylan Burns on Twitter, at Dylan Burns 1776. Burns, Dylan is his first name. A Democrat political consultant, environmental city board member, board of directors at Free State, Twitch guy, Dylan Burns TV on Twitch, by the way. I have appeared on his Twitch a few times, talking foreign policy and politics and hosting the Hippy Dippy Roundtable debates, on which I've appeared a couple of times, 47 and 50. Mover and shaker at Maryland, out of Maryland, and recent guest on The Fallen State with Jesse Lee Peterson, also Dylan Burns TV on YouTube. Please welcome Dylan, who's taller than he appears. Aspiring politician, age 20, and a Christian. Burns. Dylan, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you joining me.
Very happy to be here and happy to have that wonderful welcome. How you doing, Hake?
Doing well. Are you a Guns N' Roses fan? You're wearing a Guns N' Roses t-shirt.
Yes, I am. My father was a huge metalhead when I was growing up. He passed down his taste in music to me.
Oh, right on. Right on. That's respectable. I was told that Guns N' Roses was devilish when I was a little kid by my mother, I think. But my friends had Guns N' Roses t-shirts when I was a kid. So.
Did you like Guns N' Roses?
I only was introduced to them after I graduated high school. I was introduced to the internet. And, they had Napster and stuff. And so I heard, "Take Me Down to Paradise City where the grass is green and the girls are pretty," something like that. And there's a catchy song, and there's some other catchy songs. So, yeah, I suppose I like them. I don't know.
Do you think they're devilish?
Not in the way that I was thinking that they were devilish when my mother told me that they were devilish. They may be like, chasing after pleasure and stuff like that. In that sense, it could be considered kind of do what thou wilt type of Satanism, I guess. But I
No
didn't
way.
think of them as outright, let's sacrifice human beings to Satan type devilish.
Nah, I'm a huge Frank Zappa fan myself.
Okay.
I have his records. I'm actually trying to get a signed guitar, Frank Zappa's. I'm trying to see if I can get that.
He's passed on, right?
Yeah, he's been passed on for a while now.
I've heard a little bit of his stuff. Kind of weird music, kind of interesting though, creative.
It's very weird music. The thing that's interesting about Frank Zappa is that I felt like a lot of times he was making music mostly for himself, just whatever he liked, and he
Right.
just kind of threw it out. He kind of reminds me of like a Norm Macdonald of music. He just throws out whatever he found enjoyable, and he was able to make a living off of it. So it was a bonus for him.
Okay.
He would. I feel like he could have done. He could have been a lot more popular, but he was just having too much fun with the comedy music. I feel like if he really just unleashed his like guitar skills for most people, he could have gone so much further. Because I think honestly, he's one of the best guitar players who ever lived.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. There is another host on Jesse Lee Peterson's network whom you may or may not have heard, named Nicholas Gonzalez, and he hosts. It's called Anchor Baby's new show, and he's a guitarist himself. And I encourage you and my viewers to check him out. But I wanted to ask you before we get started with like the serious stuff. You mentioned America's founding, and your Twitter handle is Dylan Burns 1776. With all of the revisionist history, if you will, have you ever thought of or gotten pressure to change your Twitter handle to Dylan Burns 1619?
I have I'm very happy with my Twitter handle. It's actually also the handle of an old email account I have. And I have gotten a few people who have gotten angry at that. I remember there was one person who also got angry at the fact that I have an American flag in my background. And even though I remember I was debating a right winger, and even though the right winger was saying things that they vehemently disagreed with, probably much more than anything I believed, the fact that I had that American flag in the background pissed them off even more than that, because I was supposed to be the lefty and I wasn't supposed to have the American flag. But I'm a very stars and stripes kind of guy. I feel that both parties should be representing the flag.
You know, I appreciate that about when there's a Democrat who is patriotic, it's kind of, and you're a Democrat, I think.
Yep.
It makes me think positively of, especially if it's like, if it comes across as real and it wasn't just in a reaction to Trump and trying to, you know, like, because there's these gotcha people who play like, oh, I'm the real patriot and Trump doesn't have any love for America, which I think Trump is quite consistently been expressed appreciation for America. But there's a guy named Seth Rich who was a Democrat, and he seemed like a patriotic guy. I saw him like, maybe it was a bit too much, but sometimes he was like dressed up in American flag. And there's a communist whom I debated who acts like he's pro-America. And I appreciate that guy Infrared.
I'm debating him this weekend at DebateCon, actually.
Nice.
We were just shouting out.
What are you guys gonna talk about?
Taiwan. I'm a huge supporter of Taiwan, and he does not like Taiwan.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate him and his push in the sense that Infrared is a communist, but he's like a pro-America, if you will, communist, even though he accuses us of slavery as being one of the worst things, and he thinks that we genocided the Indians and stuff. Mm-hmm. But he's still like, oh, America has a lot of positive things. You don't need to get rid of America like the Antifa communists seem to want to do. So that's nice. Did you want to follow up on that?
I feel like it's strange for me because I feel that patriotism is not as simple as like just, oh, you have the stars and stripes.
Right.
I feel like it's kind of fake to be like, I'm super patriotic, but then I also stand against everything that America is supposedly supposed to represent, even in an idealistic sense. Like, let's say that I said I'm a huge like patriot, but let's burn the Constitution. Let's get rid of free speech. Let's get rid of the. Then are you really a patriot, or are you just a patriot in like word only? And there's a difference. I also would say, because obviously there's like debate about like the Constitution and the specifics and what is and isn't like the best interpretation of that or what's best for the country. But I feel that when it comes to someone like Infrared, that it's a type of fake patriotism, because it's very strange to hear someone say I'm a patriot and then espouse values that stands against like civil liberties and stuff like that. It's very strange to me. He's somebody who's questioned like even like concepts like freedom before and its inherent value, even though that's something that our nation it stands on principle.
You know, when I talked with him on Modern Day Debate, because we were debating communism on trial was the thing, we didn't really get into specifics. He spoke in generalities that it made him sound like I couldn't tell that Trump would disagree with anything that he said, or that he would disagree with Trump. So you may know more about his values, if you will, than I do. Interesting. So you interviewed me, you hosted me on the Hippy Dippy Roundtable with several others. The first time in 47, Hippy Dippy Roundtable, 47, we talked about Kyle Rittenhouse, the death penalty, wokeness, and then in 50 we talked about January 6th, 1 year later, which you attended, and I want to hear about that. Biden's first year, Marjorie Taylor Greene's Twitter ban. Did you have any like impressions about that you would want to voice to us?
I would say that every single time you come on, you leave an impression with both viewers and guests, and I'll get messaged afterwards about you being on there, which I think is, of course, great for you to be able to leave an impression, because a lot of people's like, who's that guy? I don't remember. But people remember you because you come on and you do make a splash. Obviously, I disagree with the vast majority of what you said. I think that should probably be apparent, since we're just on completely different ends of the political spectrum. But I would say that one thing that I appreciate is how blunt you are and how honest you are. Because I feel like a lot of times when I have somebody on my show who's right leaning, they kind of beat around the bush, so to speak, or they'll say everything but saying the thing that you could tell is on the tip of their tongue, because they're scared that it might like hit somebody the wrong way.
Yeah.
But you never have that feeling. The only time you won't do that is if you're concerned about somebody's channel.
Right.
And that's also something I appreciate, the concern for other people's livelihoods on the show. And so, yeah, I would say that I appreciate your bluntness. I remember JLP asked me during his interview of me, and I said, I appreciate how honest you were.
Nice. Right on, man. And I appreciate you having me on your show. It's cool. And I really enjoy talking with all those people, including the ones that I have banters with.
Of course.
You said, and I want to clear some of the things up because you appeared on The Fallen State and it got people riled a little. You said you discriminate against stupid people.
Yes.
Does that include millennials?
Of course. Of course. The thing is, of course, like you can tell in the interview that it goes from very serious to very jokey at times. And of course, I feel that was one of those moments that some people got was just me, just, like jabbing at the older generations, just, hey, grandpa, shaking my fist at them. And other people took it a little bit more serious than that. Like it was an actual like the millennials, they need to be taken down. I just like to poke fun at the millennials because they're terribly unfunny. They're terribly unfunny, and they have terrible taste in media.
And somebody else, a couple of people also took it seriously when you said, I guess you said it went over my head, but that you discriminate against people with low subscriber counts, like you won't bring them on your show or whatever, which
of course
I know not to be true. But they just took it seriously, like you really do that.
Look, I'm a greedy capitalist, right? I'm the hypocrite Democrat, the liberal elitist. When I see a chance to make money but espouse communism, of course I'll take the opportunity. I hate hardworking Americans and will bring about the caliphate and will scam my way to do it. But I'll say that, and most people realize Dylan's obviously joking. But some people, I think. They have a perception of left-wingers or Democrats in their minds, and sometimes you'll say something that they're thinking, and they'll just I like to play into people's misconceptions because I find it fun. But some people, of course, want to take it too seriously. I think some people just need to chill out.
You attended January 6th, I call it the mostly peaceful Capitol protest in Washington, D.C. in 2021. Did you watch Trump's speech that day? And what all did you see?
I did not attend Trump's speech. I got there a little later on Trump's speech. I was mostly wandering around for a good amount of it. And then I started going towards the Capitol once I started hearing reports that something was going down there. I heard that like there's people storming or something like along the lines on the ground. Like there's people storming the Capitol. I was like, what? And I went over there. I didn't really believe it because you would think, it's during this process there would be more security. Like the
Right.
idea that someone could storm the Capitol building while basically the most powerful people in the country are all in there was like a ridiculous thought. But then I got closer and it seemed to be the case that people actually were storming the building. And it was wild seeing that happen from a distance. I got to stream a certain amount of it, but then eventually my phone died, and I got closer and documented it from a closer spot. There's one of the incidents that happened that I think was widely reported. There's a scene I think there was some pictures of where there's a bunch of camera equipment from local like news reporters smashed on the ground, and like some of it was like damaged, and it was like reported by a lot of people, of course.
Yeah.
I actually saw the incident happen. I was actually right there when it happened. And the incident, I haven't seen a lot of people cover it. What happened was there was a bunch of reporters covering the violence on the Capitol. And one of them calls it a riot. And that pissed somebody off, right? Because they were like, well, no, this is a peaceful protest. And so what they did is they took their American flag and they started waving it in front of the camera.
Mm.
And then more people gathered and there was like more yelling. And then someone threw a water bottle. And then one water bottle turned into like 3 water bottles. And then they started pushing down the gate that divided them from the media. And eventually they pushed back the media and smashed the cameras. And I was able to document some of that with my phone. But that was like a wild moment seeing firsthand. It was it's still something that I haven't fully processed from being there, because it seems like an historical event when people talk about it. But while I was there, I guess I didn't realize exactly how much this day would be talked about as a day of historical significance moving forward.
Right. Do you have any guess or guesstimate how many people were there?
See, I'm really bad with like guessing the amount of people that were there, but I can tell you it was a crowd. I saw like I don't know, maybe like 50,000 to like 80,000. I have no clue.
Okay.
Because I only got to see one part of like the city, of course, at one part of the event. I wasn't there at Trump's speech.
Right.
I got there a little late because I slept in because I'm a 20-year-old college student. And so I would say, but there was a lot of people there. There was certainly a ton of people there, more than the Million MAGA March, and I was there for that too.
Have you been to many like packed situations over at around the Capitol?
Not really. The two that I went to that were I've been to 3 things. It was the Million MAGA March, January 6th, and then the inauguration on the 20th. The first 2, there was like a lot of people, and I saw violence on the first 2 events, the Million MAGA March and the Capitol riots. The third one on the inauguration, like the city was dead. It was so weird seeing like troops just marching around everyone's gates.
Oh yeah.
The whole city was. I couldn't even like get around the city.
What a pain.
It was so weird because for me, I was born and raised in the DMV, and so seeing like checkpoints like at every like few blocks was so weird because like a few weeks before I could have gotten a hot dog at the same place.
Yeah, they turned it into from being like too little security to like going overboard with the security after the fact. Too late.
Yeah,
what a shame.
it's a lot of locals in the area really resent those particularly who were violent on the day,
Right.
because they're angry that now a bunch of people who don't live in the area, came into the area, got violent, then they all get to go home, And now we're the ones who have to deal with checkpoints. We're the ones that have all these gated stuff now. We're the ones who no longer have access to these beautiful parts of the city we
Right.
used to have access to. And so a lot of people in DC, which is an overwhelmingly democratic city,
Yeah.
have a lot of resentment for what happened that day towards the people who were violent.
That's a good
Uh,
point. It's on top of it, they disagree with these people who were protesting, and some of whom went crazy. So they disagree with them, and they made it life more miserable. Wow.
I remember there was an interaction I had. I did something that was silly, and I'm very lucky I didn't get hurt. I went there in a Biden hoodie on January 6th. So I had this big Biden logo on my back and on my front, and a vote for John Ossoff pin because I was down in Georgia for that election, and I did my best to help Ossoff win, and thankfully we won. But I was there, and like every few minutes there'd be somebody who sees me and would be just like laugh at me or like spit at me or something like that.
They spit at you too?
Yeah, I had some people spit at me. I had a few like I think like once I had somebody like throw the F slur at me. No one has swung at me. No one hit me, which
Right.
I'm happy about. But there was like a few people who like, you know, voting for that man was a form of treason, you know.
Nice.
And you know what they do to traitors, and I'm just like, I don't think that's how treason works. I don't think it's you voted for a different party. I think there's two parties, and you vote for one or the other if you want. I mean, I don't think that's treason.
It's good.
But
It's a good
yeah.
thing you're tall. Like you're bigger than you're bigger in person than you look online. I thought you were like a small little like Asian when on your stream, and you
A small little Asian, you say?
Yeah.
Wow.
Are you part Asian or are you just all white?
Nah, I'm German and Irish. I'm not part Asian at all.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, it's
Nah, am I really that big? I'm only 5'10".
all right. Interesting. I don't know. I just pictured you maybe because the camera is above you right now.
Yeah,
the camera's above
that's
you.
what it is. Is
Yeah.
I have the camera at a high angle, so I think a lot of people like assume I'm shorter than I am, and I'm built like more like I'm not like built tall or built. I'm built like very wide, like kind of like a dock worker. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, square built,
At
the
the
square head on top of it.
right at the Million MAGA March, did you see any Antifa people there? Like, was the violence fighting
Oh.
amongst the people?
The Million MAGA March was super interesting for a few reasons. Where there were definitely Antifa people there, and I talk about this openly. Is that I saw, for example, there's this thing, and I think it's the stupidest thing on the planet. It's like hat snatching. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where
Yeah.
somebody has like one of these MAGA hats on, and they'll like sneak up behind him, grab the hat, and run away. I don't know what's achieved through that. I don't know if you think you're convincing anyone through. I have no clue what's achieved through that. It's not even like a particularly violent thing you just did, right? It's not like you've just intimidated this person. All that happened is they lost what amounts to probably a $15 hat, right?
Yeah.
I did see once, and this is something I really hated because it also landed right next to me. One of the people in Black Bloc took a firework, lit it, and then threw it into the open area of an outside restaurant. You know those areas that restaurants will have where part of it's like outside and they have outside tables.
Right.
They threw one of those into an outside restaurant. Later in the night, though, and this is something that I was maced by actually the Proud Boys. I was part of like one of the later night protests. They saw us a few times. They charged us a few times, but this time there was no cops between us and them, and they charged us. And I'm just kind of watching what's happening. They're like fighting and pushing back on people. I saw them one guy tried to come up and sucker punch this guy in the back of the head, and this guy just like kind of looks at me and just kind of sprays me like this with pepper spray. And I'm just standing there. In this footage online, you can just kind of see me standing there, just looking around like, what the fuck excuse my French. Why are you morons doing this? And I get maced in the face. And then like later there was this girl who I saw like pulling up. I'm trying to remember if it was her arm or her leg. I think it was her arm. It's been a while since I've talked about this. She pulled up her arm and she had like a stab wound, and on her arm, and I don't know if it was like from like a knife or just from like some like a screwdriver or what it was, but she had a stab wound in her arm, and that was something that really messed with me too because felt like a very unprovoked attack, where there were certainly events of violence from like Antifa that night,
Right.
but when the Proud Boys charged the group wasn't doing anything. And you
Huh.
can see that clearly in the footage, which is publicly available. I've posted it a few times. It's been posted by other people. I've shown it on my YouTube channel, which gave me this one of the worst possible impressions of the Proud Boys.
Yeah, I
Uh,
bet.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
it definitely didn't win my support over that night.
yeah, that's wild. My experience and view of the Proud Boys and like the people who were called the alt-right back in the day was by and large they didn't really attack anybody unless they were attacked themselves. So, but
The whole
I wouldn't put it past.
we finish fights, not start them kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for example, the Charlottesville situation where they had the Unite the Right rally. They showed up. They had their right to protest. You know, they had their permit and all that. And then the cops didn't separate Antifa and Black Lives Matter from these people, and so when you don't separate opposing groups and some of them are violent, then you get to declare an unlawful assembly. And it seemed like a convenient setup by the authorities to do that type of thing.
I usually just believe it's incompetence.
Maybe.
I usually don't try to apply malice to what could easily be explained by incompetence, and never underestimate the government's ability to be incompetent. So I would say that from the instances I saw, I don't think it was like a thing where the cops were specifically like trying to make them fight or us fight. I think it was that due to the movement that was happening that night and protesters constantly kind of marching around, they didn't constantly shift from street to street, dividing each road. And so at one point, these two sides kind of just ended up going down the same road.
Right.
And when the Proud Boys saw people dressed in black, they just saw red and they charged because they probably heard something about other reports of the night. And so I assume they were like, well, I heard an Antifa did this earlier in the night, so this is actually self-defense, and then they charge. But
Okay.
that's the problem with that is
Can't assume.
you can't assume that, because then you start macing people who were just standing there.
That's honestly what kind of I think happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. The mob heard, oh, he killed a guy, we got to chase him, but they didn't really know what happened. It looks like it was self-defense against Rosenbaum, but those guys chased him and got themselves shot at, and some of them got hurt and killed. So
That's what's interesting about those situations, because I guess like in the amount of time that you would need to respond to, say, an active shooter, if you think there's like a shooter situation, you don't have the amount of time to gather like all the necessary facts to understand completely what's happening.
Right.
All you know is you heard some gunshots, somebody's dead, now a second person who tried to charge that first person's dead, and it's really confusing, and then you just see a bunch of videos posted online.
Yep.
And that's why these situations happen. And it was true for the Kyle Rittenhouse one too. I always wait until I have all the information possible before I say anything. And I do that for police shootings. I did that for Kyle Rittenhouse. I'm doing it for the Alec Baldwin situation. I always wait until like usually a court date, unless it's like indisputable.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's what I think most people should do.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, I'm glad you were able to talk. I was going to ask you about your bad experience with the Proud Boys, because Lumi Roo, one of your guests on the first Hippy Dippy I was on, called them like white supremacists. And I was like, by and large, they've been decent, honorable men who just love America or love, the Western civilizations type thing and want to preserve the family and stuff.
It's guess for me, right? My experience with the Proud Boys is every time I saw the Proud Boys as a group, they were trying to enact some form of violence upon me that night. They tried to charge us one time, and the cops got in front of us. The second time, I got maced.
Were you
right?
dressed in black that day?
I had the Biden hoodie on, which I guess maybe if
close
you think,
enough.
But I don't know. I don't see a lot of Antifa people in the Biden hoodies. They're usually not fans of Joe Biden.
Right.
Because they see him as like a capitalist shill. So and I don't think I looked like this menacing Antifa man that night. I'm gonna be completely
You're not
honest.
small though. You're not small.
I'm not small, but you can't just profile people because
True.
they're a little larger.
Yeah, you have to be aggressing on them for them. Anyway, wow. You covered my slave. What were you about to say?
I guess for me, when it comes to the Proud Boys, they feel more like in every engagement I've had with them, they feel more like a fight club than they do a protest movement.
Oh, okay.
And I remember I actually had a member of the Proud Boy on my show a few times. His name was Suspect Sushi. He's now, I believe, facing crimes from storming the Capitol. And I remember sending him the footage, like, "Hey, here's them clearly assaulting people," and he says, "Well, this is obviously bad. Like, this is very clear that this is bad. I have all the DMs to prove it. If anybody wanted to question me on this, I think it's actually public now." And he goes to his friends and he's like, "Hey, look at this. Like, this is clearly like not a good thing that happened." And the way he explained it to me at the time was they basically all explained it away. Like, "Oh, those are just Antifas," or they deserved it, or these different things. Because, that was violence against the left or the supposed enemy, and therefore that violence was justified. And so for DC people and for people in my area, every time we've had the Proud Boys come in, they rough up a bunch of locals and then go back to their community, which is always what we've heard about Antifa, right?
Right.
That Antifa are a bunch of outside white people who come into black communities, smash windows, and then I'm like, oh, really? That's a terrible impression. And then I see the Proud Boys come in, and they just assault like local people who were just standing there a lot of times. And not to mention the what happened with that interaction with them in the black church and burning their property of their sign and stuff. That church is a church I passed many occasions when I was in DC. That also gave me a terrible impression of the organization.
I forgot all about that story. I'm not sure that I'm familiar with that story. I'll have to look it up sometime. You covered my slavery debate, and I wanted to talk about that with you. I appreciate you covering it. I talked with Infrared at the end of the modern day debate communism discussion because I made the side comment that Democrats today are much worse than the slave owners, the Democrat slave owners of the past, because they support abortion, which is killing the babies in the womb, and that's like always a wrong, whereas slavery, we were all taught, I think even you may have been taught, that there were good and bad slave owners. There were slave masters who treated their slaves generally well, and slave masters who may not have done that. And you disagreed with me, I think.
Yeah, I disagree with you. But I wanted to also say that in that discussion, I felt like you kind of gave him like a softball with like, he basically just had to explain to you why slavery was bad, and it felt like he never really actually like thought to himself, why is it bad?
Right.
Like everybody like knows like slavery is wrong, right? I feel like most people come to that conclusion, but I guess nobody really sits down and thinks about it. Like the same way if someone was to say, "Dylan, why is rape wrong?" I don't sit down and consider like the because my conscience very clearly tells me that this thing is wrong.
Right.
But I felt like he could have easily appealed to some values that I think you have to explain it was wrong. For example, what I know that you're somebody who doesn't like thievery, doesn't like theft, stealing.
Right.
And you see that as an evil. And I would say that one of the main issues with slavery was the fact of the theft of labor that happened when it came to people, that you were stealing labor from them, and an ability for a man to profit from the fruit of their own labor and the sweat of their own brow, which I believe is every person's God-given right that was stolen from people from birth in many occasions. And so I felt like it was like a really easy task there to just like, because I know you're against theft, and obviously that's theft occurring, the stealing of labor there.
You know, and you said that you don't think that you could get me to agree on human rights, which I don't believe in the term human rights. I think that that's usually like a buzzword that's usually like globalist or communist or whatever. And so I think that you are right on that, but I would also I wouldn't want to be a slave because I would want to have my freedom to move about and have my own time a little bit, at least a little bit. And nor would I really want to be a slave master because I don't even want pets. I don't want that responsibility. Not to be comparing the slaves to animals, but General Lee did call it a moral and political evil, according to Wikipedia. Like he wrote a letter to his wife or something like that, and it was just kind of a reality of life. Did you agree with his comparing slavery to like a rape or a like a child abuse situation, or did
I
you agree
feel
that there were some decent slave owners and they're honorable
so.
men?
I believe that there were. I think a better way to talk about it, if you wanted to talk about good and bad slave owners, would be there were people who were less abhorrent or less bad. And what I mean by that is, if you are perpetuating or acting upon something that is negative, if you're stealing, right, which is what slavery is, you're stealing somebody's labor. You can be a worse thief or a better thief. Like you could steal a lot or steal and also like hurt somebody in stealing and murder somebody to steal like from a cash register, or you could be a thief who like doesn't murder people and doesn't do those things, but at the end of the day you're still stealing. You're still committing a moral wrong there, and that theft of labor is still a moral wrong. And so I don't think the way to put it would be a good or bad slave owner. It would be that some slave owners were worse than others.
I don't know. I don't know if they saw it that way because it was like a reality of life, and they were purchased. They were like they did lose whatever war or get conquered or something, and so then like it was a reality of life to be owned and to own and all of this stuff. They were property. They were and some of them were able to purchase their freedom and then become slave owners themselves and stuff like that.
Well, let me ask you a question then. There's two things I'd like to say. The first thing is, just because something's a reality of the time, does not make that morally objectionable as an institution. For example, I know you're very against abortion,
Right.
and there's a lot of people who are against abortion. And let's say 100 years from now, you guys win that debate and you
Yeah.
convince everybody, do you think a good excuse for people now would be, oh, well, abortion was just a reality of the time, if you guys ended up being right on that?
Yes, in the sense that you had let me compare it to like abortion clinic bombers or people who like kill abortionists or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That is not justified at all. Just like I say that I call him a terrorist. You didn't think that he's a terrorist. John Brown, I thought that he committed terrorist attacks and murders in the name of freeing the slaves or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you said something like you felt that John Brown didn't do enough to fight against the slavery. But since it was like a reality of the time, everybody thinks that abortion is fine. And so you can't just commit an act of war to stop the genocide because you have to change people's hearts.
Our nation, though, was built upon something like that. For example, the king and the monarchy was just the reality of the time, even though monarchies and the idea that these single men can claim that God has hand chosen them to do this and do that, and that you don't need representation or democracy, that is an extremely immoral system in my values. And we violently fought against that, even though it was just the reality of the time. And so I do believe that you can, in certain circumstances, use tactics, which many people would say what tactics that we used during the Revolutionary War were similar to even John Brown's tactics. We did not treat a lot of the pro-British people very well. We even tarred and feathered many of them.
Yeah.
And were very negative. But there's another point I wanted to make about, they were conquered in wars and stuff like that. Many people were not gotten through those processes, even though I would still say that was immoral. Let's say somebody's born into it. This would happen many times where somebody was born while their mother was enslaved, and then their offspring would then be sold off. That is a person who had zero determination, not even to say that the mother did, but that's somebody even outside of the circumstances that you've just proposed. And so even though this was somebody who was born into having stuff stolen from them, they had their family stolen from them. I know you're somebody who's extremely pro-family, and they get removed from many times their mother and their father and their sisters and their brothers, and are separated from that, and the emotional trauma that is done onto them. by people who separate the families is also something that was extremely abhorrent. It was anti-family in many instances.
I heard that they a lot of times kept the families together because they worked better as families, but I have heard that they were separated sometimes as well. I think that it's more damaging when the family members themselves, such as today, where are just so immoral that they break apart on their own, or they never form in the first place on their own. I think it's more damaging to a child to have an evil mother than to have the mother taken from them by some other outside force. The child will understand the mother was taken from them. It's not the mother's fault. But if the mother's being evil toward the child, or the mother's forcing the father away because of, situations like that's happening today. And this type of situation is utterly not talked about. You know what I mean? The broken family situation. There is a hesitance to criticize black single mothers because you're racist and sexist and all that stuff. When in reality, like, that is a great evil in the world today that I think is a worse trauma than what the little slave boys who were separated from their families went through.
So you think that single motherhood is a greater trauma than slavery?
Yeah, because it's through the fault of the people themselves rather than through no fault of their own.
So I would say that the trauma and what would be worse for the child, I would say I would have to most certainly lean is towards the slavery for a few reasons. The first reason is that in many of times they are separated from their family, period, and so they have no mother, they have no father, they have no anyone. All they have is the person who has dominion over them and is stealing their labor since birth.
Mm-hmm.
That they've never even tasted freedom or the ability to sweat from their own brow and profit from it, but also they've never tasted freedom of movement. And in many of these instances, they've never tasted, say, things like freedom of speech. I mean, it's not like they can walk up to the person who is enslaving them and be like, I have a few labor complaints that I want to bring up quick. And I want to, I'm thinking of unionizing, actually. I don't think that's something they were able to do. And so even under the worst circumstances that you could possibly imagine when it comes to a mother or a single mother, things like they were not born restricted when it comes to freedom of movement, or if they were, when they hit 18, there's nothing legally binding them there. But in slavery, even adulthood does not escape them. They cannot escape
Right.
The control of the person who has dominion over them. And once they hit 18, or a lot of times before 18, they could sweat from their own brow. This child, maybe the mom steals from them, but they could hide the money. Or once they get 18, maybe they could flee in some way. That's not possible when it comes to enslavement, unless you join something like the Underground Railroad or find some way to earn your freedom. Saying you have to earn. I don't think anyone should morally have to earn it, but let's say you achieve it in some way. Not to put a moral designation on the word earn. And so I find the idea that single motherhood is worse than slavery. I disagree with that entirely.
But have you seen the crime and the degeneracy and the misery that people and the hatred that is so out of control today? I don't know if that hatred and murder and rampant rape and criminality and just spiritual deadness. Spiritual evil, I think, is worse than physical evil.
So the thing that gets me, I'm somebody who had to deal with the fact that my parents were not completely,
right,
present. And I felt much of the pain that came with that, of not being able to have that what you would say traditional family style. Thankfully, I had a mother and a father figure in my grandparents who raised me very old-fashioned. My grandfather was a Vietnam vet who grew up castrating pigs on a farm.
Nice.
And a very old-fashioned man, to say the least. And a machinist. He worked on machines for the federal government. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing. He would, the machines that print the money.
Yeah.
He made those machines. So if you want to thank anyone for inflation, you can thank my grandfather. But and my grandmother was a cook for the federal government as well. And There is no point during that though where when I hit 18, I could have let. For example, there was a situation where I had to leave a family home of mine, like I was living with family members, due to a problem I had there, a physical problem, and I don't want to get too in detail, but where a family member tried to strangle me to death. Very, very terrible situation. Now, let's say that I was enslaved there. I couldn't legally leave or call the police and be escorted off the property and now move in and live by myself like I'm doing now. I couldn't do that, right?
Right.
But now since that isn't a thing, I can do that, and so there's more options available to people to escape suffering when you're not enslaved or bound to somebody who owns you.
I get that. Now, there were some laws governing the slave masters. For example, you did say that it was against the laws in some areas to even teach the slaves to read. So the slave masters couldn't just do anything with the slaves.
Of course. Well, I would say that it depends upon how willing the local jurisdiction is willing to enforce the laws.
Right.
If a jaywalking law is on paper, but then nobody enforces it, well, then it's nothing but paperwork. But it is true that there were certain laws governing them. But I would say that trying to regulate an evil institution in that way. You can try to limit the evils, but it's better to strike at the core and get rid of that evil like we did in the United States. Because it's like, should we remove 10% of the tumor? Should we remove 20% of the tumor? No, you should remove the entirety of the tumor.
I'm not sure that I've heard that slavery was on its way out anyway, and
Why do you think that was?
I don't know
If-
why. I've just heard that. Is that true?
I would say that it's difficult to say exactly where slavery would have headed if there was no civil war. Let's say we avoided that completely and we continued, because we can see the violence was escalating with bleeding Kansas and the fight over every state, whether it was going to be a free state or a slave state. But the economy was drastically changing to a point where it was not to the same economic benefit. There was still an economic benefit to an old Southern aristocracy, but it wasn't to the same economic benefit to the nation as a whole, and the nation wouldn't profit as much as it would have before. And so when you combine that with the international kind of negative view that came with this, and on top of it, that there was such a strong abolitionist movement that was building, and how much tension it created in the nation, I do feel like eventually it had to go one way or the other. But I'm happy it went sooner rather than later. Obviously, if the Civil War could have been avoided and no one could have died, I would have preferred that.
Right.
But it seemed that the people who seceded were very determined to protect their interests when it came to preserving the institution of slavery.
Do you agree there were very fine people on both sides?
Of the Civil War?
Yeah.
I believe you could probably find individual people in very certain circumstances. But ultimately, if you pick up the flag of a treasonous rebellion,
Treasonous? Wait.
Treasonous, a treasonous rebellion of the Confederacy, to fight essentially, as was stated by Jefferson Davis and multiple Confederate politicians as they seceded, and was shown clearly on their memorabilia when you talk about the white man's battle flag and all this other stuff. It's very clear that they were fighting this war in large part, if not the majority part, to preserve an evil institution. And they were willing to betray the United States in order to do that.
But
And
they wanted to secede. They didn't want to betray the United States. They wanted to secede.
I would call that still a form of treason. For example, let's
But
say
that's
that I did.
constitutional, right?
Let me ask you a question.
All right.
Let's say tomorrow I'm going to create the communist state of Maryland. And so Maryland's voting to become communist and we're seceding. Would you call that a form of treason if we started raising up an army and firing upon government outposts, which is what the Confederacy did?
Wasn't the war started? We don't even know who fired the first shot.
I think it's largely. I'm pretty sure it was. I'm trying to remember if it was Fort Sumter, or what exactly the name was. But I'm pretty sure the Confederacy fired the first shot because they wanted to take a government post of some sort.
I don't know. I've always heard it was the war of northern aggression. because
That
Lincoln did not want it to be. He wanted the country to be one rather than two countries.
you
He
can,
didn't
I
want
guess
them
you
to
could call
secede.
it the war of northern aggression. I would call it the war of southern betrayal.
All right. I got to read some super chats that many of which are addressed to you before
No worries.
we finish up here. Azzmador over on Odyssey says regarding the which you said you compared the attack on slavery to like the attack on the Brits, the redcoats. Azzmador says this is an ignorant and dishonest argument. Great Britain was a constitutional monarchy. The British people had access to democratic institutions. The American colonists revolted because they were being denied their rights as Englishmen.
Did the slaves have their right to vote?
Not constitutionally, no. Only the white landowners.
So if I don't understand how that's hypocritical then, because my thing is I believe that we had a right to rebel because we were not being given our no taxation without representation. And when you talk about the people who were enslaved, they were people who were not allowed to participate in the system of governance, even though their census data was still used in order to increase the power of Southern aristocrats. I believe that they should be allowed. I know it's a controversial issue, but I believe black people should be able to vote.
All right. I don't think that most of them should.
What was that?
I said I don't think that most of them should.
Why is that?
Because they vote for the destruction of themselves and the whole rest of the country.
I would say that black people are voting in their self-interests and that they have a right to vote. And if you think they're voting for their self-destruction, that's still their right to vote for their self-destruction. Just like it would be my right to say, I think you're voting for your own self-destruction by voting for Republicans. Of course you see it that way. But do you think they see it that way?
They don't see it all. They don't know what's good for them. And I don't think it is a right to vote. I think that it's way too widespread for any idiot to vote. I think I agree with Jesse Lee that the landowners should vote. Men,
Right. You know what? I have a test. I think the first thing is if you call it the war of northern aggression, you don't get the vote.
I got to keep reading these super chats.
Okay.
Your girlfriend. Oh, wait. Let me just start kind of more from the beginning. The guest says. Oh, I don't know. Azzmador says with a super chat. The guest says. I don't know if this is true. That he has blank. I'm blanking it. It's not even necessarily a bad word. With men. So the F slur is accurate and appropriate, he says.
The F slur is meant to demean somebody who is part of that community, right? It's not appropriate to do that. It would be like if I started throwing insults at, like, let's say I walked up to Hake and I started saying you're something based upon your right. Like, let's say I started calling you like, we're on YouTube, right? I'm not streaming on Twitch.
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's say I started calling like you're a cracker or something like that. Like you're using derogatory insults based upon immutable characteristics. I don't think you should be able to do that, and I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it's well, you should legally be allowed to do that. I don't think it's appropriate.
All right. I don't think that it's immutable is not a proper word for that because the mayor of New York, former mayor, I guess, was married to a lesbian and now she's straight. So it's not totally immutable.
Well, I mean, of course, I would say that there are a lot of possibilities that lead to people doing it. For example, you know who Milo Yiannopoulos is?
Right.
By chance?
Yeah.
Milo Yiannopoulos is somebody, and I feel like anybody with two pennies to rub together could figure out that Milo Yiannopoulos did not have a deep change of heart here and is now the straightest man to ever straight. I think they could tell with any level of conception of the situation that this is a man who fell on economic hardship and is now trying to find a way to get out of that economic hardship. And I don't believe he's found some way away from homosexuality. And I found no research showing that you can de-gay yourself. It is possible that somebody could be bisexual, and so they thought they were gay, and then later they're like, actually, I do have attraction for women, and that's a way out of for them. But other than that, if you are a homosexual, you can't de-gay yourself. There's been no evidence shown that you could do that. Um, if you could, then it would be something that a lot more people would gain access to around the world, because that could mean they could avoid persecution.
All right. I think it's probably rare for people to change, period. Your girlfriend with a super chat says, lefties will often sarcastically ask, when did Marx say that? Whenever Hake suspects communist motives from our government. As far as I'm aware, Marx hasn't himself been in charge of any communist form of government in his lifetime. Hake refers to communism in practice and not Marx's idealistic concept of it. I don't know if that's addressed to you specifically.
I think it might have to do within the factor in the Jesse Lee Peterson interview. Jesse Lee Peterson said things like Social Security were communist.
Oh, yeah.
And I said it wasn't, because it has nothing to do with owning the means of production. And I stand by that, because governments throughout American history and state governments and governments, federal governments around the world, governments you could never say were communist. Let's say, like Bismarck is not a man you could say is a communist, okay? This is a very old style European man who had a lot of power in Germany, but even he favored certain programs in order to help the people economically. But that didn't make him a communist or make that a communist program when it came to direct payments to anyone or certain food programs. I think communism is a little bit more than the government gave people money.
All right. Taking care of business over on Odyssey, odyssee.com/@the-Hake Report says, Hake, ask him why he has a Korean anime doll in his background. Is he a furry?
You mean that thing right there?
Yes.
There is a Twitch streamer by the name of Jay Schlatt. I think you'd actually maybe agree with much of his politics, Hake. He's very funny. He reminds me a lot of Norm Macdonald, and I'm a huge fan of Norm Macdonald.
Nice.
Are you a fan of Norm Macdonald?
I wasn't really that familiar with him until after he died, and then I saw some of these highlights of his stuff, and I'm like, oh, he's cool. What a shame.
He's a very funny man, and Jay Schlatt is a very similar in his comedy. I actually got Norm Macdonald's book, and I do recommend it. It's Norm Macdonald's not an autobiography. It's a decent read, and I recommend it to anybody.
And he was a Christian too.
Yes, and he was center right as far as I'm familiar. Yeah.
Azzmador with another super chat. The 1790 Immigration Act. Only free white persons of good character can be citizens. The guest engages in homosexual acts, thus, allegedly, but thus based on character, according to our founding fathers, the guest would not qualify for USA citizenship.
So I would say that it's not allegedly, but it's confirmed. Sorry. My citizenship has been revoked. Very sad to say. I'll go on the run from ICE very shortly. But besides that, I would say that the founding fathers left the system to reform the system and to repeal laws and replace laws and reform the Constitution. And I do not think there is any standing legal practice showing that homosexuals can have their citizenship revoked because it's not of good standing character. Because if we're going that way, I would say anybody who believes that the South had the right to secede is of not good standing character and should have their citizenship revoked. We could play that game all day.
But that's part of the Constitution. Isn't the secession part of the Constitution?
Well, the question is of good standing character. Even if it was constitutional, that doesn't mean it's of good standing character to secede so you could steal people's labor.
Whatever. Your girlfriend with another super chat. Even Marx, she's going on about the Marxism and communism. Even Marx's interpretation of ideal communism is flawed. Governments often exploit its tenets for that very reason. It never is nor will be for the benefit of the majority of its subjects.
I'm not a communist, so I won't defend communism.
All right. I was defending yesterday, one more super chat since I'm on the super chats. Yesterday I was defending the innocence of the late, great Michael Jackson, who was innocent unless proven guilty, right? Accused of stuff towards children. Hydro over there on streamlabs.com/the Hake Report is addressing a caller that I had yesterday who was saying, "Oh, he's most likely a pedophile."
Yeah, I think that stuff can be strange. I don't know enough about the case to really say. But I actually made a whole video on my channel. It's called "Pedophiles Can't Stop Bragging." It's one of my favorite videos, and it goes in detail about how a lot of pedophiles openly brag about being pedophiles. Like R. Kelly, like would write into his music, would specifically, like, for example, one of his songs he said, "In the mall, I'm on the prowl like a dog," and that is widely reported where he would actually go search for his victims. Or you could like the many times he talked about like age is just a number. I mean, that's a little on the nose, don't you think? Or Ted Nugent, who very
Ted Nugent.
Ted Nugent, famously, who said that he adopted a girl before marrying a girl who was underage. Of course, wrote the song "Jailbait," and then the next song on the album was "I'm a Predator." So I mean, that's a little on the nose too.
Wow, but
And
those two men, they are like they're like musical stars, and they have women. Many of them like did not have their fathers, so they and many young ladies who don't have their fathers, they go through puberty early, and so they look older than they are. I don't know that these men were going after children so much as underage young ladies. Which
for R. Kelly's case, you're talking about somebody, I think Aisha, who was 12 or 13. I do not think under any circumstances a 30-year-old man should be engaged with a minor who is 12 or 13 under any circumstances.
Neither do I, but I'm just saying that these people were like Milo. He clarified about pederasty versus pedophilia. These people were I don't know. I wouldn't want to speculate about, especially Ted Nugent. Ted
Nugent admitted to it, though. That's why I believe him, because I believe in his own words. I find him to be an honest man. He's talked about this openly in the documentary that he got the parents' permission to date the minor, therefore he thought it was justifiable. I don't think it's justifiable for grown men to be dating minors.
Well, and I'm not for this, but isn't like the age of consent in Mexico, like, I don't even want to say what the number is. I thought that the age of consent in Mexico, as far as having sex.
Was this in Mexico?
No, I'm just saying that different cultures and different times, people have totally different
People are
immature at a very old age now.
I guess I'm a rah-rah, I love America. And I agree with the American cultural standard of 18, and I don't even want to entertain any ideas of lowering the age of consent. I don't think you would. So do I. Hake, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. But hasn't it been true that the delaying of maturity of us? You're pretty mature for a 20-year-old, but by the old standards, the old school American standards, you might not be so mature for a 20-year-old. So I think that we have a problem of keeping people infantile in their minds and spirit until after, like, the women are almost dried up and not even able to have babies. What a scam, you know?
In the Jailbait song, I believe he specifically, I would have to look up the lyrics, but I think he says like 16 was like, she was only 16. The song is about a 16-year-old. And I think Ted Nugent was 30-something. So let's say you made, and there are certain laws around this. You know Romeo and Juliet laws by chance?
No.
Romeo and Juliet laws. Let's say, I remember I was 18 and I was dating this girl who was 17, right? Because we were both in the same class.
Right.
In high school. We were both in the 12th grade. We were only separated by 2 months in like age difference. Right. So that's not anything that anybody would really have an objection with. We're in the same class, we're only 2 months apart. And what Romeo and Juliet laws do is protect people who are like that. So basically it protects like 18-year-olds who date 17-year-olds,
right, okay.
19-year-olds who date 17-year-olds. That type of stuff is different, but Ted Nugent was not like that. Ted Nugent had a huge maturity gap with the 16-year-old he sung about or the minor he was with. when I believe he was in his 30s or something when he released Jailbait. Even if he was something like 25, that would be objectionable, because I do believe that once you're like 16, 17, you can start dating and stuff like that, but you should be dating people in around your age group,
Right.
not people who are in their 30s.
Okay, so what Hydro recommended for my caller who was making the accusations against Michael Jackson, he says, your caller should watch a video called Michael Jackson Rebutta by Rageaholic that explains with facts why Michael Jackson is innocent. I don't know. One last...
I don't
Go
know
ahead.
anything about Michael Jackson. It's not really my musical taste or my
Really?
my nah. I'm not a. I know he's the king of pop, but just I don't know, man. It's just not my type of music.
Last super chat before we wrap up, and you can promote what you got going. Azzmador with the super chat states, the Declaration of Independence states that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. It is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government. The guest is trying to argue that man has no self-determination. I think that's a reference to you arguing against the South seceding to preserve slavery.
Yes, I understand what they're saying, but there's one problem there. The consent of the governed. I do not believe those who were enslaved were consenting to being enslaved, and so that picture doesn't include those in the South who were enslaved.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been enjoyable. I'm sorry I wasn't able to read more of the live chat over there in the snake pit, but
It's okay.
yeah.
We resolved a lot of big issues today. In the year 2022, we've settled that slavery is bad. Black people probably have the right to vote. I think you're maybe a little shaky on that one. Maybe I'll get you next time, and that and that the Confederacy shouldn't have seceded. I would think you believe that, or do you not believe that?
You know what? I am not sure on that because I wasn't really around at that time, so I have not read a lot about it, but they had some legitimate complaints, I think. And to this day, they have some really legitimate complaints that the federal government is kind of imposing on the people, and the federal police are the least trustworthy of all police. So there's so
I guess I just believe those impositions when it comes to things like. By the way, Abraham Lincoln offered to the people who were rebelling, like, hey, you can even preserve your slavery for now, like everything's chill, and they rejected it because they were so scared because of this Republican president.
yeah.
That he would get rid of slavery. I heard that you were questioning whether you liked Abraham Lincoln or not at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. I've heard stuff that he was, like, he wrote a letter or received a letter from Karl Marx, who was kind of cheerleading the Civil War. Unsurprising for a communist to support mass death, but I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think he was cheering it on because people were dying. I think
Not
he was
because,
cheering it
yeah,
on
he was
because he wanted
justifying it.
slavery to be
Right.
gone.
Yeah.
I do believe that if somebody wanted to join the Union Army to fight against slavery, that was a moral cause, and probably one of the best reasons you could join any war effort would be to abolish that theft of labor and to stop that evil from continuing.
All right. Well, Dylan Burns TV, guys. Dylan Burns TV on Twitch and YouTube. What else do you want to promote or say?
Well, I guess you can get all your best anti-slavery takes at Dylan Burns TV on YouTube. You can also find me on Twitter at Dylan Burns 7076. You spell my name DYLAN BURNS TV. I'd appreciate any of you guys checking out my stuff, and you all have an amazing day.
Oh, thank you, sir. Can I read these last few super chats? Well, I
Sure,
promise,
if you want to.
I
Why
promise,
not?
but we'll finish before 10:20. Azzmador states the legal age of consent in Michigan, Nugent's home state, is 16. Interesting. Azzmador states slaves aren't citizens, so their consent is irrelevant. Nice. And he says the South rejected Lincoln's offer because slavery was not a central issue of secession, he states.
So I guess I would say Michigan should raise the age of consent. I think it also had to do with the fact that Nugent said that he adopted the girl, which also feels strange to adopt and date someone at the same time. I'd have to go back and fact check if that to be sure. So I'll leave a question mark over that one, much like you left a question mark over Mr. Lincoln. When it comes to the idea that they aren't citizens, I guess my contention would be I believe they should be, and them being black or brought over enslaved or born from enslaved people is not proper justification to deny them certain inalienable rights. And so I believe that they deserved to be citizens. And what was the last one?
Uh, they rejected Lincoln's offer because slavery was not the central issue of secession.
Oh, I believe slavery was the central issue of secession. I trust the Confederates who said it was, the Confederate leadership who claimed it was. Multiple of the seceding states leaders said that the issue here is this, and they would say multiple times the issue here is slavery. That is why we are seceding.
And lastly, your girlfriend states, not necessarily yours.
Every time you say that, I'm like, are you about to ask me? You keep throwing me off.
I brought up communism, she states, because most of the Hippy Dippy panel thought Hake was being extreme when it came to his claim of infrastructure being a communist buzzword. Many people don't believe that they're supporting communism, and it's often because those proposing it will use coded language like infrastructure.
So you could say, I think if I wanted to be as charitable as possible to Hake, because I know Hake loves the left and the left loves Hake. If I wanted to be as charitable as possible, I would say that what Hake was trying to get at, and tell me if I'm right or wrong here, is that we used the word infrastructure, but then there was a bunch of stuff in the legislation that didn't really have to do with roads or bridges or what we would traditionally consider infrastructure. And so it was a Trojan horse of sorts trying to sneak in other democratic policies. I assume that's what you were trying to get at with it was a buzzword.
It is that, but it's also a centralization of control and meddling, because really, like, the local people should be the ones in charge of funding these things for the most part. I mean, there is a little bit of interest from the bigger community of states and like whatever to go and, hey, let's make a deal, help me out, build this thing because a lot of your residents are going to want to come through, stuff like that. But the centralization of like education and all of this stuff and even transportation is kind of like this a central tenet of communism, central control rather than local control.
I would say that the centralization of power doesn't necessarily make you a communist, and neither does a federal infrastructure package. Dwight D. Eisenhower was somebody who was a fervent anti-communist, and if he heard the word communist, you'd see him go for his pistol. The man did not like communism, yet he paved thousands upon thousands of miles with federal funds of roads across this country. And I don't think that was a communist program. And just because something is from a central authority doesn't make it communist either. The king, the monarchy of Great Britain wasn't a communist government. Neither would, say, the Saudi Arabian government of, not to compare these things like they're the same, of course, the American government and the Saudi or the British monarchy. But these are centralized control. This is central control. But they're anything but communist. Communists hate monarchies. Communists hate people who claim that God has given them a power. So yeah, I would say that just because something has to do with centralized federal control does not make it communist.
Communists are haters for sure. I appreciate it, Dylan. It's great to hear from you, man. Dylan Burns TV, Dylan Burns 1776 on Twitter. Thanks, man.
Nice to finally come on your show. I'm happy to come on, and invite me on again. I'd love to come on again sometime, and you will have a blessed week, okay?
You as well. And maybe next time we can take some calls. Take care, man.
Wonderful. Take care.
All right. Wasn't that nice, guys? We are at 20 minutes after the hour. I shall take a break and then get to William in California. It's been on hold forever. I appreciate you guys bearing with me through that. I only meant to keep him the hour, but I get carried away sometimes. This song coming up here is... Oh, did I put the song in there? No. I did not? Oh. Well then, maybe I'll take the break at 10 minutes till, and I'll go to William in California in the meantime. William in California, how are you doing, man? Thank you for holding.
Oh, it's all right, man. Hey, I don't know if you got my emails. I formally apologize to you for speculating. That's not me. And Rick and Maine, I'm with you. That's not me. And just wanted to apologize to you, man.
Okay, no worries, man.
Yeah, and if you look at the clip, I was actually backing up off that statement at that moment, but it's cool.
I don't remember what exactly you were speculating
about. I was
about.
speculating against one of your callers that, about their mess. But
okay,
let's move on.
Okay.
Let's move on. I would not be speaking about your listeners in a negative way.
Right.
Ever again. Out of respect.
Oh, that's cool.
And you.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Maze speculated about you thinking that you were fat.
Yeah, 6'4", 190.
Yeah.
Okay. This young man, it was very interesting, with all due respect and everything. I think he would be, if we were to graduate out of high school together, he would be considered very immature. But he's very technically smart.
Right.
But we constantly are talking about something that happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if I even, as a black man, have anything to say about slavery because, from what I understand, slavery was a business and we were owned and we did not build this country.
Right.
We were in the cotton fields.
Yep.
And I would have to say which one is worse. As far as separating the families, it's terrible. But that's not my baby. I was not around then.
Right.
And I constantly hear a lot of non-white people standing up for something that happened back then. And, ask the blacks. Don't ask the African Americans. Ask the blacks. Ask the real blacks. And if you really talk to them, they don't even trip on that kind of stuff, James.
Yeah.
They don't. Because we weren't around. But now it seems like your guest, I respect the fact that he's pretty knowledgeable. And he's kind of hung up on the hippie thing. And I remember the hippies. I do. I grew up in San Francisco in the 60s, in the 70s. So I know about the hippies. But it took me years to become an adult and understand the hippies.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, the hippies were the people who just didn't want to get drafted to go to Vietnam.
Yeah. Interesting.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, as athletes, I love them.
Yeah.
But that was kind of a chicken-S move to get out of the draft.
Interesting. Yeah.
It really was. It really was, James. It was just a move that, you had people that were drafted then and did not come back home. But then you had soldiers in the trenches knowing that this is going on back in San Francisco. Now, San Francisco and Berkeley, that was the epicenter for the Black Panthers and the protesting at UC Berkeley and everything. And speaking on Kareem, well, I'm surprised you didn't get that news about his son. That was a big news down there in L.A.
Wow. Yeah, I had not heard about his son doing that.
Well, he's Lou Alcindor.
Yep.
I think his father's name has something to do with the Egyptians. And he is very intelligent. Kareem is a very intelligent guy. He's very educated. But he's got all his degrees and masters and everything from a very liberal school, UCLA.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't want your kid to turn into a liberal, don't send them to the California system. Do not.
Yeah.
The UC, what is that? The UC system?
Yep,
UCLA, UC Berkeley. Yeah. You don't want your kid. Go ahead.
Most of the people I know from UCLA, most of the friends of mine from UCLA, not all, but most, have turned out just off the deep end liberal. Even more traditional.
Deep end.
Yeah. Crazy.
And you know, it was something else you touched about Michael Jackson. Well, I'm going to say about the basketball. I would say Will Chamberlain, the greatest, and devout Republican. Him and Bill Russell.
Okay.
You know, they like to say Michael Jordan because of the tennis shoe sales, but if you really look at Chamberlain and Russell, they were pretty good as far as basketball.
Nice.
The rent control and Michael Jackson. First, I'll go with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, if you grew up with him, a lot of people that are younger don't realize this man did not have a normal childhood at all.
Yeah.
He was weird, and I know he was, and he was always with kids. But you know, in court, this turned out to be untrue. So your caller was speculating.
Right. You don't want to do that.
You know, right. You don't really want to do that because, I mean, his proof turned out, you killed him. You killed him on the air yesterday. It's like, well, where'd you get that from?
Right.
Because in the courts, that turned out to not be true. Michael was really weird, but he had a weird childhood, too. I can't imagine getting on stage in front of the L.A. Coliseum with 80,000 people looking at me at 8 years old. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah. True.
The other thing you touched on was rent control, which is a very interesting subject. And I would definitely, being a property owner with tenants, I got 15 tenants. One is under rent control, and I can't get rid of her.
And that's a problem tenant.
It's a big problem because she's paying this little funky $975, and she's right next door in the same building to somebody paying $4,000.
Yeah.
And so rent control is not good. It's not good for the owners. In other words, what it's doing is it's taking something that you own, James.
Or the neighbors. It's not good for the neighbors either.
No, it's not good for the neighbors because you look at two different types of people. Somebody that has the economic power to pay for that.
Right.
And you put somebody next door to him that has no economic power to be there.
Yeah.
But
terrible.
They're forced on you. Yeah, it's terrible. And that flag, where's that flag? Where's the Confederate flag?
Oh, I can take it off now. I can show it now.
Should have been taking it off. You got soldiers like Rick and Maine said. Rick and Maine hit it on the nose. You got people that died for your freedom.
Yeah.
Take that, man. Put that flag back on.
Yeah.
You know, but no rent control. If you don't own property, if you don't own property and you're a tenant, you're all for it.
Right.
Because you get to impose yourself on somebody else's stuff.
Shameful.
Well, I mean,
it's kind of selfish. Well, I appreciate it, William. I agree with you, man. We need more rights for the people to their own property. What a mess. It's terrible.
Well, I mean, the kid that just got off, you know, did he not say he is not a U.S. citizen?
No, he is a citizen. He was born here to Irish and German people, I think, something like that.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. I got a German last name. It's all good. Yeah, I see. Okay, I get it. Well, he seems like a nice young man, and if he was attacked by the Proud Boys, that wasn't right. But a lot of people mistake the Proud Boys as being a white supremacist group, and they're not a white supremacist group.
And they're a huge group.
Soldiers, actually. They're actually mostly veterans, and the guy that runs the thing is not white.
Yep.
Not white at all.
Oh, yeah, I know. And
I think people are kind of pissed off at him because they can actually box.
Yeah.
Okay. They stood up to the Antifa.
Yep. True.
In Portland.
No, I respect them. Every Proud Boy I've ever met has been an honorable man, even if a couple of them had to go to jail for whatever reason.
Yeah. And to their credit and not mine, they get to get pissed off about you trampling on the flag and all of that stuff. These guys went through 9 weeks of boot camp, and some of them actually went to battle for this country. And like Rick and Maine said, that some patriotic people really don't dig that.
I agree, man.
They really don't dig that, So the hippie thing, we got a misconception, and like I said, I was a kid, and it took me a long time, James, to understand what a hippie is. Okay, I seen them on the way to school.
I know.
I seen them on the way to school. They were pretty cool, but it took me a lot of years to understand what they really were and what they were about. And it was them who infiltrated the educational system.
What a shame,
you go to UC Berkeley.
And they're evil people.
If you go to UC Berkeley or UCLA, go ahead, James. Go ahead.
You know what, man? I got to run, William, but you are so right about the hippies coming in and just subverting our institutions and whoever else
and
was subverting them.
And they actually are the teachers. If you go to UC Berkeley, all of the professors are hippies from the 60s.
Gotta go, man. Appreciate you, William. Take care.
Take care.
Okay, guys, guess what? After this break, I will be getting to Azzmador from Texas on the line, addressing Dylan Burns and the Civil War mess. But first, I finally do have this music for you, and I like this music. This is from Human Television, from the 2004 Soft Abuse Records EP. Saw You Walking By is the name of the track. Enjoy, and I'll be right back for the last half of hour 2. Hang tight, guys. Smash the mute for the music, states Colin B. You should get into the shins, Hake. Ultra beta band, says B. Emanon. I'm digging the music, Hake. Dive in the music. Miklo El Chicano. Cool music, Hake. New wave music. The last caller is more interesting than the guest, says Daniel Jimenez. Well, guys, thank you for bearing with me through that. Quick couple of super chats before I get to the calls, guys. Lord Bibby42 says, Hake, I accidentally sent a super chat to the JLP show. Disregard it for tomorrow if you can, please. Also, great interview with Dylan Burns. It was very enjoyable. Get yourself a nice cold root beer, big man. And he also says, I found the one over on the JLP show. He says, okay, I may not agree with Dylan on much, Lord Bibby42 says, but I respect his taste in guitarists. Frank Zappa rules. And Turkey Man Stinky Boy maybe gave a super chat on JLP's channel about this shirt that I'm wearing. Jesse Lee Peterson 2024. I'm actually the one who sent you guys those t-shirts. I screen printed them and designed them. I also sent the raw vector art to Kelly. I have no clue how Hassan got the designs, LOL. Oh, okay, maybe I was totally mistaken. I falsely attributed them to Hassan, who made T-shirts for Bond, too. Those are the first shirts I ever made. Nice, Turkey Man, Stinky Boy. I appreciate that, if you're listening. And then double check over there on Odyssey, odysee.com/@the-Hake-Report. I think that's about it. Yep. Thank you, by the way, your girlfriend for that info. Let me get to Azzmador in Texas. Thank you for holding, man. Thanks for calling. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, James?
Doing well as well. Thanks, man.
Well, I wanted to. I wish you would have been taking calls while the guest was on. I understand why you didn't, because you're doing an interview and everything. But I'd have liked to have been able to confront him with some actual facts instead of the.
I should do another stream with him and invite people to call in, because I neglected to do that. Generally, when I have guests, people are welcome to call in, but I didn't say it out loud, so I understand people didn't feel like they could. Well, thank you, man.
Oh, okay.
But
well, at any rate, most of, pretty much 100% of the things that he claimed were historical facts were either cultural Marxist revisionist dribble or just crap that you learn when you get your history from Hollywood movies. For example, on the issue of the war between the states, or as you accurately call it, the War of Northern Aggression, being about slavery, that is easily disproven. Yes, it is true that slavery was mentioned in mentioned prominently in some of the declarations of secessions that were put out by the various states. But let's consider a couple of things. 2 days before Lincoln's inauguration, the Congress and the Senate, which at the time was only attended by members of the northern states, passed the Corwin Amendment. This was a proposed constitutional amendment that gave constitutional protection to slavery, which means that slavery was going to be a forever thing, and Lincoln endorsed the amendment. So on top of that, if the South's real concern was maintaining slavery, they wouldn't have turned down the constitutional protection of slavery offered them on a silver platter by Congress and the president. The real issue was not accommodating
which
slavery.
He even mentioned that, by the way. Anyway.
What's that?
Which he even made a side comment referencing that, I think. That Lincoln had offered that to them, but they didn't trust it or something. Anyway.
Well, I mean, people talk about that slavery was legal in the southern states, and Lincoln said he'd keep it legal, but they rarely note that a constitutional amendment was offered up.
Wow.
And also, and I'm not going to say this about your guest specifically, but to the ignorant morons who are demanding more and more removals of Robert E. Lee memorials and so forth, an alleged racist toward whom they express violent hatred. It's kind of a paradox that Robert E. Lee was the first person offered command of the Union Army. So if the war was about slavery on the part of the Union, how could it be that a Southern racist was offered command of the Union Army?
Right.
If the whole point was going to war to free black slaves. As far as another thing, Virginia, as an example, didn't secede until 2 days after Lincoln called up troops for the invasion of the South. So there's that. But then people like your guest and people who leftists who populate these debate shows and everything, it's a huge meme that they're always screaming, give citations, give citations.
I know.
So if I may, I will give a citation. Princeton historian, Pulitzer Prize winner, Lincoln Prize winner, president of the American Historical Association, and member of the editorial board of Encyclopedia Britannica, James M. McPherson, wrote a book called What They Fought For, which was based on the correspondence, the letters and so forth, of 1,000 soldiers from both sides of the war.
Oh, wow.
And the book reports that what they fought for were two different understandings of the Constitution. Now, as for the Emancipation Proclamation, on the Union side, military officers were so concerned that the Union troops would desert if the Emancipation Proclamation gave them the impression that they were being killed and maimed for the sake of blacks, that Lincoln stressed publicly that the proclamation was a war measure intended to provoke an internal slave rebellion that would draw Southern troops off the front lines. And as even a lot of people who don't know a lot about history know, the Emancipation Proclamation freed no slaves in the North. It only freed them in the slaves, using the language in the legal language in the proclamation, that were under rebellion, right? And in the South Carolina Declaration of Causes of Secession, which was the first declaration, Lincoln's election was what caused South Carolina to secede, because during his campaign he used rhetoric aimed at the abolitionist vote that led the people of the South to believe that he had intent to violate the U.S. Constitution, which was a voluntary agreement and recognized each state as a free and independent state. And the document says that to remove all doubt about the sovereignty of states, an amendment was added which declared that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states. And they saw it as what it was, a huge power grab, which eventually used slavery as the public excuse to take away the sovereignty of the states. That's basically the states' rights argument.
Right. And
it's a whole mixed bag. And the other thing, this veneration of John Brown,
right?
Anyone who venerates John Brown exposes themselves as a very immoral person who either doesn't bother to understand history before they promote vicious mass murderers, or a very immoral person who understands what happens and promotes it anyway. Many of John Brown's victims were people who had no connection to slavery. There was a whole massacre where they went into a little group of families where they killed them all because they expressed disagreement with what John Brown said, but he didn't own any slaves and never had.
Yeah. Wow.
And also on the issue, he did one thing that I noticed, that dishonest people on both sides of an issue. And when I say dishonest, in this aspect, I mean people who are not debating for the purpose of, in the old Platonic dialogue sense of debating, where two people have a back and forth in the hopes of coming to an actual conclusion where by the two sides debating they come to a truth. Nobody does that anymore. All these people who have these channels where it's debate this and debate that, they come in with foregone conclusions and they argue for those conclusions, and they'll pivot and whatever to keep it. He said that the reason that the American colonists revolted was because basically they were slaves, in the sense that they didn't have any rights. He said that they revolted against a British system that was an autocratic monarchy that didn't have any democratic institutions or anything. And when I pointed out that he was ignorant and uninformed on that the British government at the time was a constitutional monarchy.
Right.
The two houses and all, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, basically ran the show, and the king was a weak executive by that time. And that one of the things that really chapped the Americans behind and got them all riled up was that with things like taxation without representation and several other, the Stamp Act and a bunch of other stuff, quartering of troops, et cetera,
yeah,
they were being denied their rights as Englishmen.
Yeah.
They didn't have any representation over there that they knew they had the right legally to have. So I was explaining that was not the form of government. And he pivoted, of course, and changed the goalpost, as he did on every point that I made.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just, this whole Civil War thing, if I could put this out there to any other people who dig into this stuff and try to argue the correct side that slavery was not the only or not the central issue of secession, it is this.
Oh, you cut out. Hold on. He cut out. Hang on. Azzmador, can you check on him, Nick? Oh, he cut out. Let me just push in interruption. There, it just went into a weird sound. The whole thing about this melodrama about being all self-righteous about slavery, the feds be lurking. Says, let me know if you get him back on the line. This whole thing about, slavery was this horrible thing. Joe Biden went down to Atlanta, Georgia, and, okay, he's ready. Look at how evil these people are, and they're just so self-righteous about slavery. Let me get back to Azzmador. Azzmador, I'm glad that your phone got fixed.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I was still talking, and Nick jumped in and said, you got disconnected. But anyway, well, the onus is always to prove that the person trying to point out the truth has to prove that the South didn't secede over the issue of slavery. No, the onus is to prove that the North fought a war in defense of freeing, or in offense, in order to free the slaves, which is what these moral high grounders claim. And
right.
100% of the historical record states that they did not fight for that reason. They fought to force the states to stay in the Union. When Lincoln was asked, will you allow the southern states to secede, he said, who would pay for the government? And he also stated that if he could preserve the Union by freeing all the slaves, he would. If he could preserve the Union by keeping them all in slavery, he would. And that if he could preserve the Union by freeing some and keeping others, he would also do that.
Yeah.
Lincoln was the founder of this unionism thing that basically stripped away the statement in the Declaration of Independence that we have the right to self-determination, that when the government does not meet a people's needs, that they have the right to abolish it and create a government that does meet their needs.
Yeah.
And that's what people like your guest are arguing, is that, well, men had the right to self-determination throughout history until we became America, and then if it doesn't matter if a million of you all in the same place say, hey, we're not that into you anymore, we just want to go make our own government, you have no right to do it, you're a treasonous rebel. And that's the silliest argument ever.
Yeah, it is. It's ridiculous. It's shameful. And these people are not moral people. For them to be grandstanding about the evil of people long dead whom they never knew, they weren't around, they didn't know what it was like, and they're distracting from the evil that they're doing today. It's so, these are the sickest people who are pushing this stuff. Yeah. Anyway, man, I appreciate it, Azzmador. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Happy New Year. Take care.
Happy New Year.
Guys, I have to tell you about this story that I came across in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. I just searched David Clarke, right? He's that black former sheriff out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He has appeared on the Jesse Lee Peterson show a number of times. He was a Democrat all throughout that time, but he was not really an off-the-deep-end liberal Democrat. I think he may have even been a Christian. This writer at JS Online for Journal-Sentinel, Daniel Bice, wrote this op-ed. Former Sheriff David Clarke urges MAGA rally attendees on January 6th not to cooperate with authorities. And so this Daniel Bice, I can't imagine that this guy's a Christian. And this came out just the other day, January 13th. Oh, no, a year ago. Oh, okay. So it was a year ago, but still. This is so interesting, and it's so true. And it applies to this day now more than ever. He's been proven right, really. Wow. So this guy's all, how the mighty sheriff has fallen, writes this sleazy Bice guy, Daniel B-I-C-E, Bice. In early 2017, former Milwaukee County Sheriff David A. Clarke Jr. was a regular on Fox News. He's had 700,000 Twitter followers and had just interviewed with then-President-elect Donald J. Trump about heading the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Wouldn't that have been nice, to have David Clarke as head of the DHS instead of this sleaze is Alejandro Mayorkas the guy who's in charge of the DHS that he's letting the illegals come in and all that mess? Fast forward to today, Fox News won't have him. He never landed a job with Trump. I think he was accused of, they accuse everybody of this. He was accused of, what's that thing where you copy people's stuff and you don't give proper credit when you're writing? Plagiarism. I think he was accused of plagiarism. One of the pettiest accusations. Who cares? And David A. Clarke Jr. is not known for being a writer. He's known for being a good sheriff of Milwaukee County. I think he was famous. I think he got on the map when I was a listener to the Jesse Lee Peterson show, if I'm not mistaken, as telling the locals crime is on the rise because it was under the Obama administration. Arm up. You got to defend yourselves. The police aren't able to just come in and save you. You got to defend yourselves. It takes seconds for a criminal to do some crazy act. So you need to have your arm, your weapons. Arm up. You are my deputies now, he said to those people. If I'm not mistaken, I think that it was him who said that. And he had a cool voice. And in Milwaukee, according to him, his bio, I read that he had the murder clearance rate in Milwaukee as either a sheriff or in the homicide unit. I think he was in the homicide unit at 80% murder clearance rate. Murder clearance is when the police investigate a murder and they either arrest a guy or identify the suspect or the suspect is dead or something to that effect, where basically they're pretty sure they know who did it. That's called murder clearance rate, where they pass it on to the court or whatever. Well, he had it at 80%. 4 out of 5 murders basically solved by the cops, right? Nationwide, it's 60%. 3 out of 5 murders. That means 40% of murderers get away with it. Nationwide, 60%. So he had it at 80% murder clearance rate. In Chicago, the murder clearance rate has dipped to 25, 20, 18, 17% murder clearance rate. That means 4 out of 5 are getting away with the murder, or else they're getting killed eventually. But 4 out of 5 unsolved or more. So right on to Sheriff Clarke, if that's true, right? Anyway, he's been smeared, right? Well, he's been typing extremist remarks on Parler. Clarke suggested force, quote unquote, should be used against social media outlets. What type of force? I don't know. Force of government, maybe. They're just not talking about that mass shooting by that psycho animal rights Muslim weird woman or whatever she was. Remember that woman who went up to YouTube headquarters up in Central Cal or NorCal, whatever it was, and she shot up the YouTube headquarters? I chuckled, but she wasn't a right-winger. Somebody who was mad about the demonetization mess. They messed with her money. But that's not the type of force he's necessarily talking about. And he also stated, people who went to the January 6th mostly peaceful Capitol protest, quote, he said, alert. This is David Clarke. If you attended the Trump rally in Washington, D.C. last Wednesday, January 6th, and are contacted by the FBI, or they come to your home, you do not have to talk to them. Don't let them in your home either. Politely tell them to leave and close the door, he says. He says, I have been contacted by several people who attended the mostly peaceful Capitol protest, and the FBI contacted them. If you did not go into the U.S. Capitol building, I think what he's talking about, you do not have to explain why you exercised your constitutional right to assemble. Trust no government official right now, he says. And so this snarky, silly, ridiculous, evil person, writer Daniel Bice of Milwaukee General Sentinel, local hit job against this guy, a former government official urging people not to trust government officials. I say, yep, he's right. The former lawman dispensing advice like a criminal defense attorney. Right. I've heard criminal defense attorneys say, don't talk to the police, especially the feds. You know what I mean? Because those people, you have no recourse. and they can accuse you of lying when you didn't even lie. They did it to, I think, the 3-star general. I'm blanking on his name, but he was Trump's NSA director, National Security Advisor. Flynn, General Michael Flynn, they accused him of lying when they were the ones who lied. Wasn't that crazy? And then he pleaded guilty to lying under, I don't know, some type of duress. And you may recall, anyways, Sheriff David Clarke, a year ago, he was 64 years old. He ranted about YouTube removing stuff. So anyway, I just had to share that with you because it's just crazy. And he's right about that. Protect yourself. It is great advice. You don't have to talk to these people. Anyway, let me get to Colby out of Nebraska. Colby, have you gotten on there before on my show?
I have, buddy. How you doing today?
Doing well. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It's interesting how you're mentioning Sheriff Clarke. I actually interviewed him on my YouTube channel a couple weeks ago.
Really? How's he doing?
He's a hell of a good guy. He's a hell of a good guy, and I think he's absolutely right about what he's saying now, for sure. Yeah. So he's a hell of a good dude. I like him a lot.
Nice.
So I also wanted to point out, dude, that when I think that gentleman earlier was talking about slavery, and it's interesting because I was listening to Thomas Sowell about 2 weeks ago on I think it was one of his older interviews, and he was discussing how when they discuss slavery in the modern day public schools, it is as if they act like America was the only country that's ever had slavery when the slaveries existed all over the world forever.
I know, and they pretend that it was worse in America than elsewhere. I think it was better in America. We were Christian slave owners, I think. Anyway.
So so I don't understand why the schools harp on America only and not other places. Can you kind of give me your take on that?
Oh, you're talking about these liberals who are attacking America? I think that they're just dishonest people, or they just say, oh, it wasn't chattels. They come up with this word, chattel slavery. They could do whatever they wanted to these slaves. Give me a break. I think that it's just they hate this white Christian country of America and want to just completely subvert it into a multicultural, communistic, weak, pathetic, pro-LGBTIQ, anti-white, anti-man country, anti-Christian.
Well, and I think that Jesse makes the point on his show quite a bit too that it wasn't that the general public back then loved the idea of slavery. It was actually more of the government that was pushing that and things like the Jim Crow laws. But yet, if you listen to the everyday liberal, which in fact, ironically, the Democratic Party actually pushed a lot of that stuff back in the day anyway. So it's like they don't really have any leg to stand on. I also think it's kind of the same thing that they do with that critical race theory stuff that they're trying to push in school. It's like what they're trying to do is they're not trying to teach people how to see people's character instead of their skin color. They're trying to inflame racial tensions all over again.
Yeah, it's true. And just exploiting the dumb, forgive me for saying it, but the dumb blacks who don't know any better. That's why I'm not for every idiot voting. I don't think that it should be easy necessarily to vote. I appreciate it, man. Good to hear from you. So since you mentioned that, and I don't normally do this, I don't normally like people promoting their stuff, but what is your channel name so that people can find that interview?
10 Minutes for Men and Christ. And
okay.
in fact, I might actually be having Jesse on my channel soon too. In fact, I was talking to
contact
Ermias, I think his name was.
Contact them and work that out.
Time.
10 Minutes for Men in Christ?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Nice, man. Great to hear from you. Appreciate you,
Hey,
Colby.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you, sir.
All right. Guys, I cannot get to the rest of the callers. Ian Martinez wanted to... not Ian Martinez. Ian from the great Martinez, California, wanted to comment on the late, great Colin Flaherty. Rest in peace, Colin Flaherty. I talked about that a little bit after the first hour yesterday, coming back from break. Reading the Super Chats yesterday. Colin Flaherty died of cancer, age of 64, 66, something like that. But Ian from California and the rest of the callers, I cannot get to you. I appreciate it. Hopefully you can call me tomorrow. Hopefully I will be live as normal, 9 a.m. Pacific. Catch me after the Bond Archive Sunday service today. Bond Archive Sunday service throwback premieres at 4 p.m. And then at 5 p.m., I'm on Fanatiq's channel, MrFanatiq. I will be posting it on my website, thehakereport.com. MrFanatiq. Fanatiq. MrFanatiq. Black guy going to talk with me and others maybe about January 6th. That's 5 p.m., maybe till 8 Pacific time tonight, Wednesday the 12th. Take care, guys. Appreciate it.